Elena Gross is an independent writer and cultural critic living in Oakland, California. She received an MA in Visual Art and Critical Studies from the California College of Arts in 2016 and her BA in Art History and Women, Gender, and Sexual Studies from St. Mary's College of Maryland in 2012. She specializes in representations of identity through fine art, photography, and popular media. Elena was formerly the curator and co-host of the Arts and Visual Culture podcast, What Are You Looking At?, published by Art Practical. Her most recent research has been centered around conceptual and material abstractions of the body in the work of Black modern and contemporary artists. She has presented her writing and research at institutions and conferences across the US, including Nook Gallery, Southern Exposure, CADIST, Harvard College, YBCA, California College of the Arts, and the GLBT History Museum. Leila Weefur is an artist, writer, and curator who lives and works in Oakland, California. She received her MFA from Mills College. Weefur tackles the complexities of phenomenological Blackness through video, installation, printmaking, and lecture performances. Using materials and visual gestures to access the tactile memory, she explores the abject, the sensual, and the nuances found in the social interactions and language with which our bodies have to negotiate space. Weefur is a recipient of the Hung Lu Award, the Murphy Cadogan Award, the Walter and Elise Haas Creative Work Fund. Weefur has worked with local and national institutions, including SF MoMA, Southern Exposure, the WADIS, and Minnesota Street Projects in San Francisco, Berkeley Art Museum, and Pacific Film Archive, and Smack Mellon in Brooklyn, New York. She is the audio-video editor-in-chief at Art Practical and is a member of the Black Aesthetic. Please join us in welcoming Elena Gross and Leila Weefur. And now, we begin.
Look at that crowd. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Sometimes I have no idea who's going to show up. It could be 2 people, it could be 20, it could be 200, but thank you for coming. Before we start, I always have to say thank yous to the people who made this possible. Of course, I have to say thank you to Conrad and Willis at Aggregate Space in Oakland, and Shagiyeg Cirrus. They called me one night in November 2017 and asked me if I wanted to propose a project to the Creative Work Fund, and I was crazy enough to say yes, and now we're here. So thank you for calling me. I want to thank the Walter and Elise Haas Creative Work Fund, because without that wonderful donation, contribution, grant, this wouldn't be possible. I want to also thank my film crew, most of which, maybe not most, but some of you are in the audience. Chani Bachwinkle, Kate Rhodes, Nina Vukic, Sophia Schultz-Rocha, the actors, Sandy Williams IV, Edward Givens, Alan Hemphill, Stephanie Hewitt, Shushan Tesfuzikta, Sam Genovese, and I have to, really have to thank the sound composers who were they were like the glue to the whole project. Ken, and I think Yari is in the audience. Thank you, Yari. Yari Bundy and Josh Casey are the 2 who make up Ken. So, Elena and I are going to start with what I like to call a recitation of the niggerish. It is a reading of W.E.B. Du Bois's On Being Crazy. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
It was 1 o'clock. I was hungry. I walked into a restaurant, seated myself, and reached for the bill of fare. My table companion rose.
"Sir," said he, Do you wish to force your company on those who do not want you?
No, said I. I wish to eat.
Are you aware, sir, that this is social equality?
Nothing of the sort, sir. It is hunger, and I ate. The day's work done, I sought the theater. As I sank into my seat, the lady shrank and squirmed. I beg pardon, I said.
Do you enjoy being where you are not wanted? She asked coldly.
Oh, no, I said.
Well, you are not wanted here.
I was surprised. I fear you are mistaken, I said. I certainly want the music, and I like to think the music wants me to listen to it.
Usher, said the lady, this is social equality.
No, madame, said the usher. It is the second movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. After the theater, I sought the hotel where I had sent my luggage. The clerk scowled.
What do you want?
Rest, I said.
This is a white hotel, he said.
I looked around. Such a color scheme requires a great deal of cleaning, I said. But I don't know that I object.
We object, said he.
Then why? I began, but he interrupted.
We don't keep niggers, he said. We don't want social equality.
Neither do I replied gently. I want a bed. I walked thoughtfully to the train. I'll take a sleeper through Texas. I'm a little bit dissatisfied with this town.
Can't sell you one.
I only want to hire it, said I, for a couple of nights.
Can't sell you a sleeper in Texas, he maintained. They consider that social equality.
I think it's barbaric, I said, and I think I'll walk. Walking, I met another wayfarer who immediately walked to the other side of the road where it was muddy. I asked his reason.
Niggers are dirty, he said.
So is the mud, said I. Moreover, I am not as dirty as you.
But you're a nigger, ain't you? He asked.
My grandfather was so called.
Well then, he answered triumphantly.
Do you live in the South? I persisted pleasantly.
Sure, he growled, and starve there.
I think you and the Negroes should get together and vote out starvation.
We don't let them vote.
We? Why not? I said in surprise.
Niggers is too ignorant to vote.
But, I said, I am not so ignorant as you.
But you're a nigger.
Yes, I'm certain, what do you mean by that?
Well then, he returned, with that curiously inconsequential note of triumph. Moreover, he said, I do not want my sister to marry a nigger.
I had not seen his sister. So I merely murmured, let her say no.
By God, you shan't marry her, even if she said yes.
But I don't want to marry her, I answered, a little perturbed at the personal turn.
Why not? He yelled, angrier than ever.
Because I'm already married and I rather like my wife.
Is she a nigger? He asked suspiciously.
Well, I said again, her grandmother was called that.
Well then, he shouted in that oddly illogical way.
I gave up. Go on, I said. Either you are crazy or I am.
We both are, he said as he trotted along in the mud.
So I know that we're all here for what was stated on the website and the many promotional tools that we are attending a performance tonight. What are the rules of performance, Elena?
Well, I believe it's Fred Moten who said,
Yes.
performance is the resistance of the object.
And the object? I think the object tonight is blackness. Would you agree?
That sounds about right.
So what are we performing?
Blackness, I suppose.
What are the requirements involved in performing blackness?
Well, I guess that's a hard question.
Indeed.
Who's asking, I suppose?
I guess I'm asking.
Well,
What does it mean to perform blackness?
Well, it's a curious thing. No one who's actually black performs blackness. They just
Right.
are, right?
Kind
That's
of.
fair to say?
A little bit. I think we all kind of, or we all who identify as black are always performing blackness. Perhaps it's assumed that we all are always performing a kind of blackness in public and in private. But how do you perform it?
Well, there are certain machinations, aren't there? It's defined by movement, navigation, manipulation, contortion. It's kind of a slippery, elusive thing, I would say.
I still don't think I know how to perform it. But I guess that's the question no one is supposed to ask. No one who is black, no one who is not black is supposed to really know how to perform blackness. We just do.
But performance also to perform implies an audience, right?
Right.
Whatever you're doing, however you are embodying or inhabiting a space, you are doing it to be received by
Right.
another who is an audience.
Exactly. And I know the audience showed up tonight to watch us perform blackness.
They're watching it now.
They're watching it now. Or are we watching them?
Well, so that's the thing, because if we're all individually performing this thing,
Right.
then the audience themselves is also in performance,
Ah, the tables have turned.
and we are the audience.
We're the audience.
Right,
And we're watching them perform.
right, exactly.
While we're performing blackness in private or in public,
Together, but
Together.
also separately.
but separately, in our minds,
Right,
in our bodies.
exactly.
Right.
On a
Because-
stage.
Because you can perform blackness in isolation.
Right.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I can't tell you more about that, can I? I mean, I can, but will you know what I mean when I say that I perform a certain look, a certain gesture, a certain movement, a certain feeling that you can maybe understand intimately, but you can't know, right?
Well, can we know it in collectivity?
Well, obviously. That's what we're doing here.
That's not so obvious to me.
That's what we're doing here tonight, right?
Maybe.
That's why we're here together. That's why we did this thing. That's why we wrote these things together, is because we believe that there is some kind of cosmic collective thread that ties me to you, you to me, my blackness, your blackness to mine, right? That's
Kind
what
of.
we're doing.
It's like an internal fight, almost. Because I'm trying to understand my performance whilst performing.
Right.
So I'm fighting myself, I'm fighting you, and I'm fighting everyone watching. Didn't you write something about this?
I did.
Huh.
So there's a piece in the book that you have not read because you're not allowed to read it yet, that I wrote. It's called The Boxer. The moment before the bell rings, the boxer shifts from one foot to the next, the pounding of his heart thundering in his ears, echoing through his sinewy body. His eyes are clear and focused. Every muscle, every tendon is on high alert, like a tightly coiled spring waiting to be released. Each bout is an exchange, a dialogue between fighters, an arrangement between men, a transference of energy. The boxer, young, virile, and angry. Though his anger is controlled, his aggression precisely pointed. He orients his body in anticipation of another's, to protect, to strike. Growing up, I rarely saw examples of black men touching one another except in those moments of either platonic camaraderie or scenes of abject violence, sports being the ambiguous line between them. My father was a boxer in his youth, which is how I imagine all boxers to be. As a young man, he would willingly spar with other boys in the neighborhood, but as an adult, he flinches when his shoulder meets another's while riding on the subway. Something about the guardedness of his body always felt natural and familiar. The boxer's body, hard as a stone, impervious to the elements, though being broken down and eaten away over time. I always thought how sad it was to harden one's body from the inside, to remain closed off from softness or intimacy. But I realize now there are other ways to be soft, and that intimacy, such a nebulous thing, can show up in the space between two people in ways neither of them expects or totally understands. I realize now even violence is a kind of intimacy, a gray kind, not laudable, mind you, but inescapable, as much a part of the fabric of our lives as any other kind of intimacy, like love, codependence, sex, and equally mysterious. Intimacy requires a kind of vulnerability, an opening up and a turning outward. That's what makes skin contact so gratifying or so repulsive. To be touched is to be reminded of our bodies in all their precarity. What could be more precarious or more vulnerable than knowingly yielding one's body to the power of another? What could be more intimate? There's a Gordon Parks photograph that I often come back to depicting a nighttime street fight in Harlem for a series Parks did in 1940s for Life magazine called Harlem Gang Leader. In it, a cabal of heavily shadowed men converge upon one another in a heated brawl. In the center of the melee, two men struggle against one another, their arms wrapped around each other's bodies. If you, like me, grew up watching boxing, you recognize this scene instantly, after a serious blow to the body. The boxer steadies himself against his opponent, forcing their chests and heads together so as not to lose balance and to protectively block his aggressor's advances. But when flattened out like this, the action arrested in the stillness of the photograph, how easily one could mistake them for lovers.
You know, I realized something. While you were reading that piece, I realized the audience doesn't know the rules for the night.
No one's told them.
No one's told them the rules. Dina, would you like to do the honors?
The rules. Tonight, the books are free. Please take one book. However, you may only take a book once the performance is over. Think of it as a gift bag. Respectfully acknowledge the existence of each individual with a smile. This is an exploratory space, not a space for you to take up by talking about yourself. You are only allowed to ask questions. You are only allowed to ask questions unless you are called upon. None of these rules are hierarchical. However, there is one that we will enforce. Under no circumstance are you to direct any inquiries to any Black identified individuals during the duration of the event. This rule begins now, and it will be enforced until everyone has safely exited the building. And yes, that includes asking why.
Thank you, Dina. So back to this fighting and performing in isolation. Do you remember the last time you performed Blackness in isolation? Can you think of a moment?
This morning, most likely.
But not now.
Now.
Tell me about this morning.
This morning, and every morning, you wake up, or I wake up. I'll use I statements. How about that? I wake up, and I open my eyes, and before I look at anything around me, before I look at my partner, before I see that the sun is shining, I have to contend with myself in a certain way. And I become aware of my body in space. And oddly enough, maybe not the first thing, but in becoming aware of myself, in feeling myself in bed, in whatever state I'm in, I am feeling myself in a Black body, in a Black space. Regardless of what else is happening around me.
I never thought about that. I wonder if there exists in each individual, among all species, regardless if you're Black, a collective proprioception. Can we perceive all of our bodies' positions in space? If Earth was absent of light and the only perceivable space was Black, would I be able to detect your Blackness without the ability of sight? A collective cognitive awareness? Close your eyes, everybody. Locate yourself. Locate your sense of position. Breathe in. Reach. I don't remember much about my grandmother. Her Blackness soured. A tumorous brand of Blackness that is often lost on me. A brand that simmers in its own self-righteous indignation. The brand of Black that wears its suffering like a badge of honor. Something I do remember, though, is a sort of phrase she spoke often. Niggas and flies, she would say, through the fine-haired moisture of a sweaty upper lip. She would look around to make sure someone, anyone, could hear her, and she'd repeat herself. Niggas and flies, white people and lies. It's a remix of an old schoolyard chant. You know, the one that goes, niggers and flies I do despise. The more I see niggers, the more I like flies. The children would say. Sing say those children. I don't wonder for a second that my grandmother was among them. The pressed white shirt and pleated skirt. Little southern self-loathing Black girl. I don't doubt for a minute that she ever figured out how to escape the imposition of their imagination. The imposition of the lies shaped into song. A perennial hatred. Spread like a swarm of flies. If I reach far enough, will my Blackness ever be able to locate hers? Though erratic my flight pattern may seem, to her at least, I can very well locate myself amongst the other nigger flies. If a nigger is akin to a fly, then locating oneself in the mastery of avoiding obstacles, a maneuver to be mastered only by the niggerish. Though she still breathes, the carbon dioxide she expels, the tiny droplets of soured breath that collect in condensation, fills a black space which I will never, ever locate myself. So who are we performing for? What does it mean to perform in collectivity? Is it that moment when you see a group of black folks and you feel comfortable enough to walk up to them because you know that you all can comfortably sit in that same performance together?
It's the nod.
It's the nod.
You're walking down the street,
Uh-huh.
San Francisco,
Not San Francisco.
anywhere. Certainly San Francisco.
It doesn't happen that often.
Doesn't happen that often, but it happens. And
Okay,
when it happens, you
let's
know.
relocate to Oakland then.
Oakland. Walking down the street,
Uh-huh.
Oakland.
Yeah.
You're coming towards me.
Uh-huh.
I'm walking towards you.
And what happens?
We make eye contact.
Uh-huh.
We nod.
Nod. It's a simple performance to
It's
me.
a simple gesture,
Simple.
but it's a performance that says so much without saying anything. Like, we don't talk to one another. We don't actually have an exchange. I don't know you, you don't know me.
Right. But we know what to do when we see each other.
Right.
We were all standing in a circle. About 5 of us. More like a round blob where we gathered in the spirit of wasting time. It's what we do. Did. We kicked it. Gathered around an ideology of blackness. That, for most, was unattainable. For the metrics were decided by no one, but expected of everyone who stood in that circle on that day, on any day. The lines were resistant and black. I wonder if, for them, the lines were also invisible. I don't remember exactly who was there, but in my foggy memory of that moment, I'm pretty sure Anne were present. They were the usual participants. What I do remember is how loud we were laughing. We laughed that black vibratory laugh that erases the chalk from hopscotch gritted ground. We laughed so loud our mouths were noiseless. The frequency of our inanity was the color of silence. Black. What I don't remember is the texture of the container that held them in space. They were floating. Maybe the room had been erased by all of the laughter. 'cause all I can remember is the darkness. All I can remember with certainty is the 5 of them sitting in a circle on wooden chairs, like school desks. All I can remember is how quickly their guns were drawn. They all held one. Then one of their guns goes off for real this time. And I remember because it was louder than the others. Then I realized there were only 4 and one had been hit. What I do remember is how beautifully still the body lay, drawing a perfect line, becoming part of the ecology.
The Blackberry Tests. I'm going to begin this with a quote. That is how I learned that if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Audre Lorde, Sister Outsider. Blackberries are a fruit that I don't have much experience with. I was probably in high school the first time I'd ever intentionally eaten one. I held the berry between my fingers, feeling the ridges and grooves of its body, feeling for signs that it was ready to eat. The riper the berry, the better to eat. Blackberries grow in the strangest of places, probably because they are invasive and tend to find themselves wherever it is possible to thrive. For me, this meant along the wire fences, coombe trellises of suburban playgrounds. Thorny branches would stick out all crazy from between holes in the fence, bearing fruit, black and tempting, but also dangerous. No one ever knew if they were poisonous or not, but unfailingly, someone would dare you to eat one. There were only a handful of ways this could go. 1, accept the challenge, eat the berry, wince or gag or swallow, be laughed at, the mob moves on. 2, reverse the challenge by challenging the challenger to eat it instead, deflect attention, establish dominance, the mob moves on. 3, reject the challenge, clam up from fear or outright refusal, endure the eye rolls, the disappointment, the taunting, the mob moves on, but without you. I often chose rejection. I call these games the Blackberry Tests. What was at stake in these tests wasn't to prove bravery or courageousness, but to prove belonging or kinship. The desire to belong and the fear of alienation were twin emotions that dogged me throughout these childhood games. Every test has a right answer, and you either passed the test or you failed. Failure, of course, was inevitable, but I couldn't see that far yet.
Birds flying high, you you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossoms on the trees, that's how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I'm feeling good.
I can remember how quickly the times were turning. Quickly the times were
Sorry, didn't notice you there. Then again, you didn't notice me. So we'll remain passers-by until the next time we speak. I hope that I can make you mine, for another man steals your heart, and once your beauty is mine, I swear that we'll never be apart. Walks by me every day. Her and love are the same. The woman has stolen my heart, and beauty is her name. I hope that I can make you mine, for another man steals your heart, and once this beauty is mine, I swear that we'll never be apart. Walks by me every day. Her and love are the same. The woman has stolen my heart, and beauty is her name. I hope that I can make you mine, for another man steals your heart, and once this beauty is mine, I swear we will never be apart.
Sometimes I think about the botanical presence of blackness. Did you know the blackberry plant by nature is unwanted? It is a plant negotiating its way into a world that is averse to it. But for what it is, or at least what the world considers it to be, invasive, it has a long lifespan. Despite the natural hostility, it is impressively impenetrable. Have you ever held a blackberry? I've grown familiar with the sweet sap stains on my fingers. Have you noticed how dark it is? How black as me it is? As solid a black any single body can assume. Close your eyes and think about what black tastes like. Is it a sweet black? A bitter black? A ripened, textured black? I've recently learned that blackberries are a perennial plant. They're self-fertile. Year after year, they grow, they bloom, they die, but they return from their own rootstock. If the blackberry is what constitutes the material dimension of the black body, how can I not see blackness in its ecogeography? They operate in the space of gaps, growing only in an attempt to fill them. So I guess that means blackberries are performing too. Would you say that our performance is over? Have we performed enough blackness tonight?
Who's the judge of that, I suppose?
They are.
Or are we?
We're the judge of them. Since our performance is never ending, technically, I want to acknowledge a willing participant of this performance, Vivian Sming, who is a brain and design person behind this wonderful little object here. And Sming Books and Objects is her brainchild. And I just want everyone to give a round of applause for Vivian. You can continue this performance in your head while reading the book. Since the performance is now over, I guess that means you can get your own copy. Thank you.